course, we can't deal with even early Renaissance Italy without dealing with Florence, known for her key role as the maternal figure in the Florence. Florence was known for its strong craft guilds, the textile trade, and the gold florine, which was so well kept that it became the standard coin of exchange throughout Europe. What do I mean? Coins at the time, if it was a gold coin, it would be measured by weight. So in other words, as one example, this gold florine might be always exactly 1 ounce. Those standards were kept so highly by Florence that it becomes accepted throughout Europe without question. Now, this is very powerful. Just like today, the American dollar is the currency of international trade, it will be the gold florine, which means a lot of money is passing through Florence, which means they can build things like a cathedral. In this case, Santa Maria del Fiore, or the Florence Cathedral. It will be started by Arnolfo Cambio in about 1296. And it really reflects the competitiveness that Florence felt with neighboring cities. What do I mean? Well, here we see on the left the cathedral at Siena, on the right the cathedral at Lucca, two of their near neighbors. The importance here is these cathedrals, just like in Gothic France, are going to be very competitive elements. There's almost an arms race when it comes to these things, showing how pious a community is, but also how many resources they have. Because no matter how pious, if you don't have money, you can't build a cathedral. So they build this. Now, the cathedral was originally intended to hold the city's population, although it only holds about 30,000. And here we're up in the dome looking down, and you get a sense of just how massive this structure really is. And when I say it holds 30,000, that's 30,000 standing room only, which was the most common way to see services at the time. Literally everyone in town would try and cram into the cathedral. It's where you want to be seen for Sunday service, or Christmas, or Easter, or other days. The facade is marble, and it's really lined in marble. The cathedral itself is brick, and then they line it with this thin layer of marble. And it carries on the pattern from the neighboring baptistry, which you see in the foreground there. That baptistry has that set pattern that goes back to Pompeii. They're mimicking, when they build it in the 11th century, they're mimicking the wall painting styles that they see in Pompeii, breaking up into rectangles so you don't get this massive white building. Well, they're going to take that pattern and that idea and move it over to the cathedral. But of course, the facade of the cathedral won't be completed for some time. In fact, it won't be completed until the 17th century, due primarily to internal arguments over design. Now, one reason for this is that the facade in Renaissance Italy was not designed as an integral element of the structure, as was common at the time. So when you look at, for example, a Gothic cathedral in France, usually they're thinking of the facade as much as they're thinking of the interior. It's all seen as one single unit. In Italy, and we see this often in Florence and Rome, what you will find is they build the structure, and then they worry about the facade, and then separately they worry about the bell tower. In the case of the cathedral, well, that will actually go one step further, as we will see. Now, looking at the structure overall, the building is not meant to appear to pierce the heavens. Rather, it favors a certain earthbound horizontal element in its design. It's not like the Gothic cathedrals trying to stretch vertically towards the sky. Instead, it's got this very terrestrial feel that gives it this very earthly sense, and a sense that really does match Florence, which tends to be very down to earth, very pragmatic in its business dealings. The sanctuary, or crossing, was redesigned during construction to increase the interior space and make the dome the focal point of the structure. This creates an interior with unmatched spaciousness, as we've seen. And here we see Cambio's version, and then that will be expanded again. The crossing will be expanded and the nave will be lengthened. This part being the nave. The crossing will be expanded later on during construction. This is really, really common during any kind of Gothic and Renaissance construction, that elements change throughout time. But the whole thing is centered on this idea of a massive dome, which is a bit of a problem because when they build the cathedral, I should point out, they don't build a dome. They run into a problem. There's actually not enough trees in Italy to build the scaffolding needed to build the dome. So the dome's going to wait for quite some time before it's built. They're left with this large open structure. And you say, well, that's horrible. They would have gotten soaking wet and everything else. Everything would be ruined, but not necessarily. It's only the area under the dome. The floor is marble, so that's not really a problem. They would have moved the church service under a roof. They would have had temporary structures in place, but there is no dome at this time. Now, Giotto will build the Campanile, which is essentially the bell tower. This will be designed in 1334. The bell tower is completely separate, again, very similar to Pisa, and it's designed to be freestanding, and essentially it is the sum of its components. It's almost like they stacked different pieces together that don't necessarily go together. For example, this upper third looks completely different from the middle third, which looks completely different than what would be the lower third, except it's fairly squat and small. Here we see a lot of sculpture. Here we see twin lancet windows, and then we see these massive windows at the top. It's a very interesting structure. And things are getting larger because, of course, they're further away. If you're standing on the ground down here, that window looks more in proportion with these than it does from this angle. And it's simply a matter of perspective more than anything else. The compartmentalization is reminiscent of Romanesque design. It's something the Romans did quite a bit. Whenever they build something, that they would compartmentalize different levels as separate structures. And here we see one of Giotto's designs for the Campanile.